Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Monday already, and that means it's another week of live radio laying in wait before us, right here on Truth Frequency Radio on The Kev Baker Show. And of course, I'm coming to you live from Glasgow, Scotland, which is, of course, the first smart city in the UK. So a lot of 5G stuff going on in Glasgow, lots of big data being generated by myself and all the other citizens that live here. And big data is something that we've been covering quite a lot on the show in recent times. We had Pippa King on the show, fresh from her TED Talk, and she was talking about the data trail that we leave both knowingly and unknowingly from the moment we are born till the minute we die. And then just last week on the show, I was going over, kind of roughly going over, this amazing documentary that's on Netflix right now, The Great Hack. And it was showing you the inside story of how Cambridge Analytica, one company of many, may I add, that are using big data, well, for, shall we say, nefarious purposes at times. But what's important to take from that show is, one, the amount of data that is out there, and two, what its value is to companies, to political parties, to just about anyone out there, if they know how to use it and they know how to manipulate it. Well, today we're going to be getting into all of this and a whole lot more and going way, 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 way deeper as we usually do. And I've got a regular guest coming onto the show today to help me talk about all of this. And usually when myself and Brendan Drachler hook up, we set off in our little spaceship, we shill for NASA, and we go right round the universe and then some and come back and we talk about space, exoplanets, you name it, we cover it. And I know a lot of the audience out there really enjoy that. And Brendan himself, he's got one of the top science podcasts in the US. And I don't say that just as a throwaway comment, folks. Just last week, Brendan's podcast, The State of the Universe, ranked in the top 10 of the iTunes podcasts for science in the US. So today we're going to shift gears because Brendan has a brilliant show where he talks to a lot of the world's leading scientists. And it's not just space that Brendan covers. So we're going to get into big data. We're going to get into 5G. We'll probably be covering some space news as well along the way. But I'm really, really looking forward to this. And for anyone who may be a first-time listener, welcome to the show. And you're in for a rare treat because Brendan Drachler is somebody that studies astrophysics at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And he's working to understand how we can detect the most dense and energetic objects in our universe, black holes and neutron stars. He's also working to understand the fundamental structure of black holes and how we can learn more about them. Brendan has spoken on topics ranging from our solar system to the nature of dark energy to supernova and many things in between. Now you can find out more information about Brendan over at thestateoftheuniverse.com. That's all one word, thestateoftheuniverse.com. You can listen to his podcast on iTunes, Speaker. I'm sure there's thousands more ways to listen, and we'll get Brendan to tell you all about that. So, Brendan, welcome back to the show, man. And I'm telling you, every month that goes by seems to pass quicker and quicker. And it just feels like a blink of an eye since you were on last time. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm great, Kev. It is crazy. This year, I don't understand how this year has gone by so fast. I don't get it. I don't understand. Even my own show, it's crazy. I just keep pumping them out, and the days go by, and the months go by, and all of a sudden I'm back on your show. And I love sitting in this seat, being the person that is being asked the questions. It's honestly much easier. It's much easier than being the person that coming up with the questions is a hard thing. being asked the questions is easy because then you can just spew a bunch of bullshit. And maybe you're right, maybe you're not right. Either way, you say something and there's your answer. You're good to go. So I'm glad. Of course, people, I'm not going to spew bullshit only like 50% of the time when I'm shilling for NASA. But when I'm not shilling for NASA, I'll try to give you good information. Kev, thank you for having me back. Oh, by the way, the show, it can be listened to anywhere. The State of the Universe, literally anywhere. I mean, if it's a podcast platform that's actually used by people, chances are you can find my show on it, YouTube, everywhere. So, Kev, it's good to be back. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. And Brendan, I think you've got the right idea. I think you've got to really, it's like full spectrum dominance. If there's a platform out there that will take your material, get it on there, dude, because the censorship and everything else that is ramping up right now, it's important to have as many bases where you can kind of leave this information for the public as we can. And of course, I'm talking about censorship there. And all of this, does kind of factor into the world of big data and what we're going to be talking about here to start with today. And I was listening to your podcast, your recent podcast. Is it with a Dr. Clip or Culp?
Dr. Chris Culp.
Culp, yeah. That's it. I've got problems with his surname. But that was a really, really good listen. And I found it interesting because I'm genuinely interested in machine learning, artificial intelligence, even if I wasn't doing the show. And to listen to somebody who really is at the cutting edge of this stuff. And interestingly, I'd switched over from more your line of work into the field of big data because this is the place to be right now, Brendan, isn't it? This is what companies are looking for. And if people out there are maybe thinking what to go and study in college or what they're going to do, listen really closely to what Brendan's going to tell you here, because this is a very big industry and it's only getting going right now, Brendan.
Yeah, it's crazy. And to people like who, machine learning is taking off. And part of the reason it's taking off now, I mean, it's been around for a long time, but never have we had data sets like we have now, right? If you're going to train a computer to do something, if you're going to train it to do a task, you need to give it some basis for its training, just like you need a human. You need to teach a human how to do something. And the way in which you teach them is you expose them to that thing. And they're going to suck at first, and they're not going to do very good, and they're not going to handle obstacles well. But as you expose them more and more and more and more and more, then all of a sudden they get better. And then, after a long time, you become a professional. A computer literally operates the exact same way. You have to feed it data in order for it to get good at something, right? So if you want to make an algorithm that can do a specific task, you need to feed it lots of data to chew on and train on and get good at. And that's why we see like artificial intelligence and machine learning becoming such a big thing today. The algorithms have been around. They're so simple. If you are mathematically inclined or computer science inclined in any way, you can go on websites like Coursera. Coursera is a great website where you can take classes for free. It's like a university online. It's completely free. You can sign up. You can do it. You can learn like hundreds of things. They're not a paid sponsor. But I am, interested in them. I think they're a great organization. And I've actually done some machine learning courses on their website. And the basis behind some of these algorithms, Kev, are so easy. Like this is rather simple mathematics. But now we have the power to use data to actually, get a return out of this simple mathematics. And you see it blowing up. If you go on LinkedIn right now, okay, if you get a 4-year degree in computer science and you know how to do machine learning, hell, if you get a 2-year degree in computer science, or even if you have like computer science experience at a baseline level, you don't even need a degree. You could get a job in machine learning. And the starting salaries are like, skyrocketing in this field because they can't find enough people to fill them. I mean, you're talking about like $140,000 a year starting salaries. And there's 10,000 open positions in the United States alone. This is a booming field and it is just taking off. And so I'm interested in people like Dr. Chris Culp who have seen this coming years ago, and they got it on the ground floor because that's the place to be. And, you could still get in on the ground floor, right? Because this is very much a new thing. This is like I said, it's been around for a long time, but just now the utilization is really, really taking off.
Absolutely. And you were talking there about...
Are you there, Kev? Am I speaking to myself?
Oh, I was muted up. It's my fault. Yes, it's all this talk of algorithms and big data. I was getting excited there, Brendan. That's what it was. And then one of the things...
I thought the computers had shut us down. The AI had
Not yet. One of the things that I was really kind of struck by when I was looking into machine learning and how they go about it was the way that the data sets are organized and how crucial the data you put into a neural network, machine learning, that data really has a big influence on what comes out the other end. And there's this old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And I remember seeing a story, and it was about how a hospital were going to try and get away from some of the biases that had been shown by the board when it came to hiring new doctors coming out of university. And there had been a tendency that males would get hired more than females. So what they said was they would take the humans out of the loop. They would get some machine learning to, they would utilize this in the process of recruitment. So what they done was they fed it piles of data, gigabyte after gigabyte of historical data. And what they expected was it would be a far fairer process. And they were hoping that, all these prejudices of the past would disappear. However, because the AI, the machine learning, had been taught on data that was full of these prejudices that were causing the problem in the first place, well, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that when the AI was making the recommendations for the jobs, it was exactly the same as the humans. 9 times out of 10, it was recommending men over women. So the data, that's a really crucial point in this whole kind of process, isn't it, Brendan? That the actual data sets that these neural networks are trained on in the first place.
Yes, this is a huge point of contention. Maybe not contention, but a huge, thing that we have to think about when we do machine learning or when we do big data is that if you're going to train a computer, right, just like a human, if you don't expose it to a variety of scenarios, then it is going to have some built-in prejudice, right? So as an example, if you're designing a machine learning algorithm or a neural net or some artificial intelligence that does facial recognition, right? It will not do a very good job at recognizing faces if you only feed it, say, like white females. Okay, well, then when it gets to a black female, it won't be able to discern, wait, is that a face? Or is that like, a traffic light? Like, what are you showing me? I'm not sure what you're showing me. And so that's a crucial thing. You might not realize how crucial it is. Now imagine that same algorithm gets packaged into like a self-driving car. Okay? If your self-driving car can no longer discern, a black female versus, a light pole on the side of the road, well, that's going to be a big issue. If your self-driving car can only discern that there's a white woman in the crosswalk and not a black male in the crosswalk, then it's going to be mowing down everyone who's not a white woman. So you need to build these algorithms with as little bias as possible. And doing that means exactly what you suggest, Kev, feeding it unbiased data. Because, like you said, garbage in, garbage out. That's very true. It's true for humans. It's true for computers that learn like humans. Okay? If you give it biased data, if you give it bad data, it's going to give you bad results. It might work really well for a subset of the population. Like you said, it might still pick all the males out of the hospital registry and not pick any of the females because that's what you taught it to do. So it is very imperative that the people who are using these algorithms know what they're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of the ways that people can really relate to this is the fact that I think most of the audience here, or most people listening to this, as vile a website as it is, at some point, we've all been on Facebook. I'm still on Facebook just now. And we were involved in the learning loop when it came to these neural networks and the facial recognition, because it used to be a couple of years back, Brendan, it would ask you, it would say, there'd be a picture of me and you posted online, and it would say, well, Kev, is this Brendan beside you? And you would have to answer it. You'd have to tell it, yes, that's Brendan. And now, though, it's got to the point where it doesn't ask you anymore. It's learned. It's gone beyond that stage, and it always keeps improving, right? Because even now, if it's only like the side of your face or maybe a shot that's coming down at a different angle, no longer does it need to ask anyone because it's already learned all of that. And that's the stages. You have the humans helping the neural networks to learn at the beginning. But then, as far as I'm aware, then they start training themselves, right?
That's essentially exactly right. That's almost exactly what Facebook did. It's very interesting how it really was like one of the pioneers of that facial recognition type software. Because I do remember when you'd upload a photo and it'd say, "Hey, is this Kev Baker over here?" And you train it. What you were doing in that aspect is you were literally training it. You were teaching it. Okay, you were teaching the computer to think for itself. So it would ask you. It would say, "Brendan, I'm pretty sure that this is Kev. Tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong." And if you say that it's wrong, well, it will try to, understand why it's wrong and then come back at you later. Hey, is this Kev? Is this Kev in the new picture you uploaded? Yes, that's Kev. Okay, good. I ironed out that kink. Now they keep going and they keep going and they keep going. And it gets better. And now it's so good to the point that, like you said, it doesn't even have to ask you anymore because you've trained it. It's really damn good at what it does. You've taught it. Okay. And now it can run along and do its own thing. The analogies, you might get tired of hearing them, but the analogies between the way that these neural networks, and the way that specific human-oriented tasks work is insanely paralleled. Like it's almost like that's where the name neural network comes from anyway. Is the idea is you model it after a brain. You model the computer to think just like a human would think, and it's some of the things it can do is insane. One of the examples that I often bring up is Yelp. If you've ever been on Yelp, you can leave a review of a restaurant or establishment or whatever, and you can upload pictures. Well, what Yelp does now is it can classify your pictures just when you upload them. It can discern, is this food? Is this the dining room? Is this beer? Is this the outside? Is this the environment? What are you uploading? What picture are you uploading? And it will be able to discern that and categorize it instantaneously. And that happened because years and years went by where people would say, hey, this is a picture of my food. This is a picture of a drink. This is a picture. And it got really good at it. Really, really good. It's scary good. And there are some other, platforms that unfortunately their neural nets or their machine learning techniques don't do they do a good job, but they do it badly. And what I mean by that is you look at something like Twitter, right? Why is Twitter such a vile cesspool every time you get on it? Twitter is horrible. Twitter, never, ever, ever do I see a good conversation happen on Twitter. I don't know what it is about Twitter in particular. That has to be the worst social media site for me. I have a lot of traction on Twitter. I can post a lot of stuff on Twitter. I like to post stuff on Twitter, but I do not converse on Twitter. I do not have conversations on Twitter because the algorithm tends to bias against stuff that gets engagements. All right? That is what it has been taught to do. Take the stuff that gets engagements and put it towards the top. Well, what gets engagements? Polarizing stuff. So you never see anything good on Twitter unless it's a picture of a dog, or some girl with her tits out. You never see anything. You literally see, Donald Trump is a rapist, Donald Trump is a racist, or Donald Trump is the greatest man to ever live. You just see polarizing because polarization gets engagement. So that's a circumstance where
that engagement's quite interesting as well, Brendan, because in a way, the AI wants us to engage in posts. And I say that because that way we're able to generate more data points that will go into our personal profile. And it's this big data generation that we're going to get into here. And many times, people will be able to relate to this. You've maybe thought to yourself, is my microphone listening to what I'm talking about? Because it's uncanny how many times I come online and something I've been talking about in the past couple of days just happens to appear as an advert on Facebook or on Google or something like that. And yeah, sure, possible. Maybe they have access to your microphone. But what's more likely happening is the fact that we have left that much data online through our own posts, through our engagements with other posts, that literally it knows what we're about to buy. It knows what we're looking for. And it's not that nefarious way that they're listening to everything we say. It's just that we've left so much data out there now, Brendan, that the AI is able to basically treat us like the product, basically. We are the product now. And it knows, it tailors our ads for us. Wouldn't you agree with that? It's not so much that it's listening to us. It's just that it's figured us out because of all the information we've left online already.
In many cases, that's true. Like when it comes to our hobbies, that's true. I'm a big fan of martial arts. I'm a big fan of fighting, boxing, MMA, etc. And they know that about me. They know that about me, so they will advertise that stuff to me. If there's a fight coming up in my area in New York, they will advertise that to me. They know it. I don't have to explicitly search UFC tickets. They'll say UFC 244 is coming up. It's in New York City. Do you want to buy tickets? It's only a couple hours away. They'll say that, right? They know that. There's a lot of things that are built in hobbies in particular, because those are the things that we tend to search. We search our hobbies online. If you like bow hunting, you search for bows online. So yes, your name essentially gets tagged with this hobbyist. You're a hobby bow hunter. You like fighting. You like skateboarding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some things that I cannot attribute to that. Like, there are some things that just freak me out. An example, do you know what Slack is?
No, I don't.
Kev?
No.
Okay, Slack is this essentially like a chat room app that is very popular in the science community, and you can invite all of these people, and you can upload videos and pictures and post plots, and it's very useful for science. It's a good way to communicate with a bunch of people in one chat room. And when someone mentions your name, if they say, "Hey, Brendan," and they ask a question, it will send you an email. It would tell you someone mentioned you. Go online and check your notification. Well, I have mine set up so that it doesn't notify me between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. All right, I don't want it to send me emails when I'm at home, because I don't want to be bothered with it. Scientists, they don't sleep. I don't understand them. They'll be up at 3 a.m. asking me shit. Stop. But okay, I shut that functionality off, and I was talking to some people at lunch, and I was telling them, like, I shut that functionality off on Slack because it's annoying when people message me. Literally the same day when I open up the App Store on my phone, the iTunes App Store, the very first thing is an advertisement for Slack, and it says, "Do you need to learn how to tame your Slack notifications?" So there are things like that that are very specific, are unrelated to a hobby, and are very related to a conversation I had, that make me think, like, wait a minute, maybe there is some nefarious stuff going on here.
2 secs. I'm just the chat room are saying we've got an audio issue, but we're connected up to the network. We're still going out on iHeart. We're still going in on TuneIn app, and I'll try and sort this during the break. I know the people in the chat room obviously can't hear me saying that, but I'll type that into the chat room, Brendan. Just in case you're wondering why I was a little distracted there. Yeah, there are some creepy instances I have as well, right enough, where I've really wondered, how does the algorithm know that about me, or how does that post appear on my timeline, just when I've been thinking about it, maybe a couple of days before or on that very same day. And when we come back after the break as well, because we're coming up rapidly on the break, I'm going to get you to explain to the listeners just how much data is being produced in the world right now. Because I had to listen to you twice today when you were going over the amount of data that we're throwing out there. It was astounding. It truly was astounding. And why is that important? Well, it's important because last year, for the first time ever, the cost of data actually exceeded the cost of oil annually, and that's only set to go up. And not only that, but the data that we're producing, it is so detailed now that basically every aspect of our life can be known by some of these companies, like your Cambridge Analytica. And it's all due to the fact that places like Facebook, like Twitter, all of these other platforms that we knowingly, we walked in with our eyes open, Brendan. That's important to say. We all clicked agree without reading the terms and services. But it's the importance of this data and how valuable it is, and what it can be used for. It's quite scary at times, dude.
Yeah. And, we did kind of walk into it, but also there was some, poor, like, all right, they weren't very transparent either, right? So there's two people that are guilty here. They knew what they were doing. They knew they were duping us and tricking us into giving all our data. We knew that we would be giving all our data, but maybe we didn't know how bad it would be.
Exactly, yeah. Now, we're almost coming up on the break. Before we go there then, Brendan, let the listeners know where they can find all of your work. And folks, this guy interviews Nobel winners, no less. So please check him out. I know I've got a big scientific kind of audience because they know I like to geek out on the science. So if you like science, You're going to love Brendan. So, Brendan, let them know where to find you, man.
You can find the show everywhere. Like I said earlier, please watch it somewhere. If you watch it somewhere, give it a rating and give it a review. Tell me what you think about it. Send questions in. Watch it on YouTube. Leave a comment. Leave a rating. Let me know what you think, and I will provide the best guests that I can think of.
We will be right back. Welcome back. Brendan Drachler from the State of the Universe podcast is our special guest here today. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about neural networks, big data, 5G, and a whole lot more on top of that as well. And remember, please check out Brendan's work over at thestateoftheuniverse.com. And he was telling me before the show, he was in the top 10 downloaded podcasts in the science section for the US on iTunes last week. And Brendan, I want to congratulate you on that on air, man. That's brilliant. And I was saying to you as well, I like the way you're using the kind of sound clips and stuff. I think people who listen to this show are going to really enjoy your show if they check it out, man.
Well, I hope they do. And I hope they
we insist they do, right? If they're going to call us NASA shills, the least they can do is go and check out your podcast, right?
That's true, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So
let me know what you think. Let me know if there's people you want to hear me interview, just like you do it for Kev.
Exactly. And before the break, I was kind of started off the show. We were talking about very basic neural networks and facial recognition that we could all kind of relate to because we've all kind of experienced it in our online activities. And everything that we do online, every keystroke, every website, every order placed, every text conversation, it's all producing data. And big data is big business. And you've been looking into this data. And like me, you were astounded when you realized just how many or how much data is out there. And it's only set to increase. So talk to us about what you found with Google in particular, because some of the figures there, like I was telling you, I had to go back and listen twice because there was even numbers I didn't even understand.
Yeah, well, hopefully here, I'll try to make you understand, Kev. So Google, which, I mean, what is there an alternative to Google at this point? Like, is there a Bing? Get out of here. If you use Bing, leave, okay? Stop using the internet if you use Bing. What else is there? Do you remember Ask Jeeves from when I was a kid? You were...
Yep.
Geez, do you remember Ask Jeeves, Kev?
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Geez, that one. And then Yahoo was a popular one. And anyway,
yep.
All of them. They don't compare. Google gets on average, 40,000 search queries every second. Okay? That translates to 3.5 billion searches per day and 1.2 trillion per year throughout the entire world.
Wow.
Now, all of that data has to be processed, right? So currently, Google is processing like 20 petabytes of data per day. Their estimated storage of data, which is data that they have sitting in, hard drives somewhere, they build these large storage clusters. You might notice that if you sign up for a Gmail account, they give you 15 gigabytes of free storage. You could sign up for an unlimited number of Gmail accounts if you so pleased, and you literally have access to unlimited data. That is a service that they're willing to provide because data is so damn cheap. Before I tell you how much data they have stored, Kev, I want to get some perspective from you because I was born in 1995. By the time I was storing data on computers, data wasn't a big deal. We're talking 2005, 2006, whatever. When I first started actually utilizing computers, I know kids get computers now at 3 years old and they get phones shoved in their face at 3 years old. But in my case, maybe 10, 11, I started utilizing computers storing data. At that time, 250 gigabyte hard drive was normal. What was it like when you were around for the emergence of, sort of small data onto big data? What was it like for you?
I remember the first gigabit hard drive coming out, dude. I really do. And my first computer was something called a Sinclair ZX81. And you had to hook that up to a cassette player if you were trying to load up games. And it was an absolute nightmare. If you were drawing a picture, if it was loading a picture, it would literally write it one line at a time, and you try and guess what that picture's going to be. And one error, just one error, and that was it all back to square one, and you had to start again. So yeah, over the years, the difference in the storage mediums, the capacity, it's absolutely insane when you compare it back to the day, dude. It's incomparable.
Yeah, you can go buy a terabyte hard drive at Walmart right now for like 35 US dollars, right? It's insane. So Google, with that in mind, Google right now has on hand 20 exabytes of data. Now, what is an exabyte? Well,
this is the question I was asking myself in the bath just earlier. I'm like, what the hell's an exabyte?
Yes. Well, let me put it into context, because you can't possibly imagine what that is. But maybe you can imagine that a typical computer has like 500 gigabytes of hard drive space when you buy it. You buy it at the store, just a typical stock desktop that, pretend you're like 70 and you're just trying to get something that's normal. You buy it 500 gigabytes, you bring it home. That's pretty customary. Like a 500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte hard drive. If you bought 30 million of those typical computers, you would match the hard drive space that Google currently stores your data on. So 20 exabytes is equivalent to 30 million, a rough equivalency, 30 million typical 500 gigabyte storage hard drives.
Wow, dude. It's crazy.
It's insane.
It's hard to even wrap your head around this kind of, these things. It's like numbers that we really can't comprehend.
No, you can't comprehend them. It's Facebook is very similar. They process 2.5 billion pieces of content and 500 plus terabytes of data every day.
Every day.
2.5 billion pieces of content per day. That's posts, that's likes, that's sharing videos, that's uploading photos. 2.5 billion per day. Okay? And that translates to, I have the number written down here because I can't possibly remember all this. That translates to nearly 2 million, typical computers worth of data. All right. So even Facebook, which, doesn't quite process the same amount of data that Google does, has tons and tons and tons and tons of storage. All right. And that doesn't even count places like Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, which has their own storage banks, Twitter, which has their own, and then I have a quote, which I find very interesting. The VP of engineering, Jay Parikh is his name at Google, or at Facebook rather, says, and this is a quote from him, "No one will care that you have 100 petabytes of data in your warehouse in just a few years."
Wow.
Okay. So even these numbers we're talking about, they will not compare to the amount of data that you will be able to access, that these companies will be able to mine from in just a decade. Okay? That amount of data, pretty much the only thing holding back large data storage at this point is the money that these companies want to invest in building more warehouses. That's it. That's it. If they wanted to, they could build a new warehouse tomorrow with, another 10 exabytes of storage in hard drives, and they could begin stockpiling information there too. Nothing is stopping them from stockpiling, hundreds, if they want to, of exabytes of data.
Now,
and then mining it for your information.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you covered this in your show or not. I can't quite remember, but it's one thing, the data that we're producing on these platforms and online, but there's a real problem with bot networks, bot accounts. And does that factor in at all? I mean, how much data? Did you come across how much fake data there is, almost faux data, because it's been produced by these botnets and bot accounts?
I haven't. And the reason that I didn't come up, that's such an interesting figure, if we could know it, an interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't think they could know it, right? Because bots are getting so damn good that it's becoming increasingly hard to tell apart a real human and a really good bot.
Yeah, I was telling you about that Elon Musk, the open source AI company he's got. And it was a software or an AI package that the media said was a fake news generator. And that was one aspect of it. It was able to write articles. However, when you really dug into it, the reason that they banned it from coming out publicly, they put out the white papers and things. So in reality, somebody will probably reproduce this science. But they were saying that the bots were so advanced that it would have been near enough impossible for algorithms to pick up on the language they were using. And that's usually how they identify that something is artificially generated, it's been produced by a bot. Because every time these bots all fired up, they were doing things completely independently and organically, and there was no set language structure. There was no telltale sign for another algorithm to go in there and actually identify it. And these things are only going to get better and better and better because that's the nature of machine learning and what we're talking about.
Yes, it's so crazy that you have Instagram accounts that are completely fake, but they will have hundreds of posts, hundreds of pictures that they have somehow mined from some location. There's even bots out there, artificial intelligence, that can, scan a bunch of pictures of human faces and literally create an organically, simulated human face that steals features from a bunch of other human faces. So you can literally create like what looks like a completely normal, completely different human adult. So that even if you went on Google and you tried to back search the picture, you wouldn't come up with someone. The picture doesn't belong to anyone because you literally have an algorithm that can steal, it takes my forehead, Kev, it takes your nose, it takes someone else's mouth, and it can piece together a human being, and it can change the pigmentation of the skin, and it can do all of that. So that's an interesting point. When it comes to big data, is a lot of the data belongs to fake people, and how as a company do you sort through that is a very interesting question.
And
And I
even
don't think that there's an answer.
Yeah, and companies that aren't kind of harnessing AI and machine learning, if they haven't started to do it by now, there's a good chance they're going to get left behind. And these companies that are starting to use machine learning and organizations, whoever's taking advantage of it, I just wonder, Brendan, when they're buying the data, when they're buying the training sets per se, how much of that data in there is rogue data, because you were even showing me a calculator where people can figure out the cost of or how much their data is worth. And of course, all of our data is bundled up and sold in packages. But this is the kind of thing that's used to train the AI, right?
Exactly. Yes. That's precisely right. And I encourage any listeners to go on that calculator. Kev, I don't know if you have it pulled up right now, but that's fascinating. It's put out by the Financial Times. It's not perfect. It's not going to predict your data cost, perfectly. But the point is, there are certain things that make your data cost more. Like if you have depression, people will pay more for your data if you have depression. People will pay more for your data if you're obese. People will pay more for your data if you have kids, or there are certain factors about your life that make your data cost more
Well,
because
Brendan,
you are a better human to market to.
well,
Like a single male doesn't maybe buy as much stuff as a family. So
yeah. Well, I'm
certain
sitting here
things.
looking at mine. Folks, anyone can do this. You go to ig.ft.com. How much is your personal data worth? And you'll be able to find that. And I am worth, Brendan, are you ready? I'm worth a whopping 41 cents, sir.
Oh, I'm worth more than you. I'm worth
Whoa!
50 cents. Yeah.
And I think the
It's insane.
maximum, yeah, I think the maximum is like $2, I heard you saying, right?
Yeah, even trying to make my data cost as much as possible, just toying around, telling them fake stuff. I could only get my data to cost at most like $2, and that was if I was a millionaire with like every ailment that you could possibly
Some of the
imagine having.
questions ask you if you've got your own aircraft and things, so that must be something that jumps up your cost as well, right?
Yeah, you can mess around with it and click different things and see how it affects. One thing I noticed is my data was worth 50 cents. If I were to click the box that I had, anxiety or depression, it would jump my data up 25 cents. It would increase it to 75 cents. And then if I checked the box that I was obese, it would bump it up to a dollar. So just having these two, it's interesting. Why do companies value depressed and obese people? And it probably has everything to do with that they're easier to sell to. It's much easier to sell stuff to people who seemingly are suffering from mental illness or have lack of control or whatever. and or at least in the frame of the company, they feel like these people are better marketable,
That
more
sounds
marketable.
terrible on the face of it, but I actually think you're right. I
Yeah.
do think that's exactly why the cost of the data goes up there.
Mhm.
And, we've talked about the kind of the machine learning stuff, the big data, the fact that they can use that to, figure out personality types. I've covered a lot of this on the show last week as well. But we were talking a moment ago, or you were, about an AI, a neural network that's able to generate original faces. And that's one thing. That's pretty creepy and weird enough. But
Mhm.
we're now entering the world of deep fakes. And this is something that we've been talking about on here for a good long time. And I think as we approach the 2020 election in your country, it's going to become an even bigger issue. Now, it might not be a big thing for people like myself and Brendan or any of you listeners out there, but for people with a high public profile, say a politician, actor, something like that, this could be a real problem because we're talking about the generation of footage that is really hard to distinguish between what's real and what's not. And it could have me and Brendan sitting here looking like we're doing the podcast. And in reality, we've been talking about technology and space like we usually do. But with this deep fake, it could sit there and we could sound like white supremacists. We could be
Mhm.
talking about X, Y, or Z, anything. And it's going to appear as if it's real, Brendan. That's a real problem.
It's crazy. The deep fakes are crazy to me. And couple that, the scarier thing, Kev, isn't that it can be done in my mind. The scarier thing is that it can be done in today's climate, because today's climate is like the cancel culture, where no one double checks anything. They take everything at face value. If they see someone post on Twitter that Donald Trump was saying the N-word at a press conference, they won't even check it. They'll just assume it's true, you know? And so now you have videos, and of course, for years, videos have been like the gold standard. Like, oh, well, let me see a video. Let me see a video. You can't fake a video. It's so funny when you show, old people like 78-year-olds, 80-year-olds. You could look up videos of them, watching faked videos, like fake UFO landings or something, and they can't even conceptualize the idea that it could be faked, because they hold film as like the standard. Like if you record something, it's got to be real. And so you take this culture that we live in today, which is so readily, readily, not readily, but ready to cancel everyone and everything for everything they do. And you add in this ability to create deep fakes, and it's scary. It's scary. And thankfully, we haven't seen a circumstance yet, at least I haven't, where it's been used in that sort of way. In most cases, I've seen it as just sort of used as almost comedy, putting people's faces on some silly stuff. I saw, if you know Joe Coy, the comedian, I saw one with him on The Rock's face,
Yeah. I've
lifting
seen
and exercising.
Nicolas Cage. There's a video on YouTube with him. He's on a whole host of like classical films, and it's
Uh
Nick
huh.
Cage's face on everything. And it
Yeah.
is. I think this is going to be a big problem, as we move into the future because people are going to take advantage of this. And
Yes.
again, it's training the AI as well to spot deep fakes when they're being uploaded onto YouTube. So you've got to think of that other side of things there as well. And it used to be perfect example you used when it comes to UFOs. I used to say to people, unless you've got a video of it, don't even bother showing me because I'm not any
Exactly.
good at Photoshop and I can fake
Hmm.
things on there. So unless it's
Yeah.
moving images, don't even come near me. Now,
Hmm.
well, what kind of standard do you set? Because even moving images now, it's so
Exactly.
hard to tell.
Yes. And that's one of the big issues. And I think that's why you see such an influx of companies trying to hire people that can do machine learning and artificial intelligence, because we're not the only ones thinking of this stuff. This is being thought of by every. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future you have campaigns, presidential campaigns, that are literally hiring technology experts to try to snuff out this sort of stuff online and get rid of it, or find a way to prevent it. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that in the future. If you see, Donald Trump 2020 hires a technology advisor whose sole job is to try to prevent this sort of thing from happening. that you have to adapt, and I think you'll see the adaptation. But I don't know if the adaptation is going to work because it's powerful technology.
Absolutely. And during the last election, we had all the talk of Russian interference and Russian bots and everything else. And I was really, really happy to hear you point out the fact that, these Russian bots, as real as they were actually infiltrating both sides of the political divide, and they were just trying to cause discourse. And in my research recently, we've come across a document from NATO which talks about mimetic warfare. And this is the use of memes. And we see how powerful memes can be on Twitter and Facebook and things. And it's coming to light, Brendan, that, more influence is being exerted on the political process in your country and my country from bad actors, shall we say. It's not Russians, but it's people that are manipulating this type of mimetic and information warfare, because the big data is telling them who to target. And not only that, companies like Cambridge Analytica and the other ones out there, Palantir, all the rest, they can get involved. And you've got the people to target, but also what to target them with. And because they know so much about us, basically these memes have the potential to make you swing one way or the other, depending on what they're designed to do. So as we move forward, every election, everything that's kind of on the online space, it's going to become so murky, so unclear what we're looking at, why we're looking at it, and how do you police this, dude? How do you police this? It's going to get harder and harder.
I don't think, I think this comes back to the censorship thing that we always talk about. I don't think that it should be the goal of the platform to deal with this. I think that it should be on the individual, the everyday person, to check and verify their information. Stop taking everything at face value. Stop getting polarized over the littlest shit. Stop, reacting the way you react when you see something like a meme. Think, stop, consider, double check your source. Be sure your information is accurate. This is a problem, Kev, that I truly believe is not handled by Twitter. It's not going to be handled by Facebook or Instagram. It's going to be handled by everyday people learning how to navigate these murky waters. The question is, will they learn? And I don't think they will.
I don't think they will either. No, I don't think they will. And you're right. I think the rise of fake news.
I can't hear you again, Kev. I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're right. I was muted. But the thing is, the rise of fake news, as they call it, you're spot on, because a big part of that was the fact that people weren't checking things in the first place. And even most of the time, people weren't even reading the actual article because they were just grabbing the headline and taking that as fact. And there was a couple of psychological tests out there. There would be a really bombastic, hyped up kind of headline. And it would definitely designed to make you click. However, when you started to read through the article, when it got to the third paragraph, it says, if you're still reading by now, please be aware that you're actually taking part in a social experiment. And what we're trying to do is see how many people share this post without even reading it. And when I went back onto Facebook, the post has been shared something like 3,000 times. Yes. So yes. I think people, you're so right. I think the platforms maybe could do something, but we have to play a part in this as well. We have to be really, really cautious when we're absorbing information from online, from the media, from anywhere. We should be very, very diligent.
Yeah, I should say, like, my problem with having the platform do the policing is how slippery of a slope it could be. You know what I mean? Because if they start saying, okay, we're going to ban fake news. Okay, what classifies as fake news? All of a sudden, then you have Facebook calling things fake news when in fact it's just things they disagree with. So that's why I think the humans need to be more vigilant, and the platforms can maybe take a step back because they're already, doing this censorship thing where they're getting rid of stuff that they disagree with. And we don't want to provide them with another excuse to do so. That's the only reason I say the platforms should stay out of it. In an ideal world, the platforms would come up with a way to fix it. But we're not in an ideal world. We're in a world where the platforms are trying to take advantage of their user base. So it's a
We
it's
had
a slippery slope.
yeah, there was a Dr. Robert Epstein that was speaking to the Senate hearing just recently, and he had voted for Hillary Clinton in the last election. But he was basically saying that, Google, he was using Google as an example. He says by making one post and sending it out on the day of the election, they actually drove 2 million to 10 million voters to the polls to vote for Hillary Clinton. Now, we've had Project Veritas coming out, and, they've had secret video. You can see them talking about the fairness of their algorithms and things, and them talking about, well, if you support Donald Trump, maybe you won't like our idea of fairness. And Dr. Robert Epstein was saying, with one push of a button, these big tech companies can decide the outcomes of elections. Because if they do go and post to somebody on the day of the election to go and vote or don't vote, they've got a really, really strong power to manipulate people one way or another. And, Russians being a threat to democracy, I would see something like Google and big tech being a far bigger threat to democracy.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that you do see organizations like Twitter that seem to lean left because, as a company in America, you generally don't want to lean left. Organizations in America do not get very good things from the left. Generally, they get unregulated freedom from the right. So it's very interesting to me that we see companies doing this. And it confuses me, frankly, because generally you see companies want to lean towards a conservative side because the conservative side is generally associated with unregulation, with lower taxes, the things that historically we've seen. Why then are these companies seemingly leaning to the left? I don't understand.
Hold that thought, Brendan, because we are going to be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Second hour of today's show with my special guest, Brendan Drachler. And we're getting into neural networks, big data, deep fakes. And I was saying to Brendan during the break, I really love this kind of conversation because it's the kind of conversation I have often. But I like to do that because I think it's important to get as many different opinions and ideas as we can, because from all of these different ideas, we can bring them together and we can look at them all, and hopefully all of us together and individually will have enough information to formulate a better opinion of our own that we may not have had beforehand. So, Brendan, big data. I know there was another couple of points you want to make on this. One thing to follow up on what we were talking about before the break is, and the perfect example to use here is Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook. And we've seen him going to the Congress and all the hearings and everything else and acting like an alien over in front of the EU, stuff like that. But it worries me, because there's a lot of talk of regulation and, stuff like this. And you would think that would scare the hell out of somebody like Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and all the rest of it. But on the contrary, it's almost like Mark is laying out the red carpet saying, please come and regulate us. And I was saying to you, that's worrying because it's almost as if maybe they've got enough lobbyists, they've got enough politicians in their pocket to ensure that these regulations, they're going to be okay for Facebook. But any competition starting up in the future or maybe on the go just now, they're basically going to be closed out of the marketplace because it's going to be things that they just can't actually come up to scratch on. What do you think on that?
I think that's an excellent point. And this is one of those points where I always think, man, that's a damn good point, Kev. It's something I hadn't considered before. It's something that didn't occur to me. It's something that seems logical enough. And then I always weigh that in my head with, but is Mark Zuckerberg that smart to play the long game? Or is he just inept, like just, going through the hoops every day? And I don't know. You like you said, you watch his testimonies, and if that's even what you want to call them, his questionings
yeah.
in front of the United States Congress, and then he also did one in front of the EU, I believe, right?
Yep.
And I watched them both. Man, the EU people are so much better at questioning him than the United States. In the United States, they didn't even understand the business model, right? They didn't even do their homework enough to know that Facebook makes money from advertisements and selling data. They didn't even understand the idea. But in the EU, man, they were grilling him. And I thought that was interesting to watch. But yeah, it's an interesting point. And it could very well be the truth. It could very well be the truth. I'm interested to see where that goes in the future.
Same
Because
here.
it does seem like they're being, you know, adamant about regulate us, please regulate, because they're so foolish. On the surface, it looks like they're being so stupid.
Yep.
But maybe that is the long game. Maybe it is. I'll tell you the thing that scares me the most about this conversation we're having in big data. The thing that scares me the most that I don't see a lot of people talking about, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen anyone talking about it until I thought about it. I'm not saying it's an original idea. Maybe people are talking about it, is that these companies have a hold on their data. Okay, like Facebook has a hold on all of the data. It doesn't necessarily sell data in real time, right? It stores the data somewhere, it sells it later. That means that Facebook has a real time way of seeing how public opinion changes as it pertains to companies. So think about like McDonald's, right? If McDonald's makes some decision, they make some decision that negatively affects public opinion, you would expect the stock price to go down, right?
Yep.
Now, how do you measure negative public opinion? Well, one damn good way of doing it is by seeing how people are talking about McDonald's on platforms like Facebook. So if you own the data and you can mine the data in real time to see how public opinion is changing as it pertains to companies, then you could very well have your own form of insider trading where you know if the price is going to go down or if the price is going to go up based on public opinion because you own the public opinion. So that's a very interesting way that I see that these companies could potentially have like this new form of insider trading. They have information that no one else has, and they can use it for their own financial gain. I don't know if it's happening yet. I suppose it's not, but it very well could happen in the future. And that's one of those circumstances where you have to keep a close eye on these companies and what they're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Facebook themselves, they've admitted in the past that they've run social experiments to see if they could affect the mood of their users. They would put positive posts on some people's news feeds. They would put negative posts on other people's news feeds. And they were able to see a direct link to the way the user used the site after that, how they kind of participated, be it positive or negatively, depending on what they were showing there. It's really, I think, Facebook, social media, these things have grown to the point where they're far more powerful than anyone ever imagined. And I'd never thought about what you just said there, that insider trading aspect of this. And even to take that further, speculation here, but you could then have people manipulating the markets by pushing certain positive or negative stories depending on what they're trying to do.
Yes, you could absolutely, you say, okay, McDonald's. Well, let's say Facebook and McDonald's aren't getting along for whatever reason. Facebook wants to negatively impact the sales at McDonald's. They could easily do that, either by suppressing advertisements, or making advertisements for other companies rise, or making bad news stories rise. They completely control the feed. You notice in Facebook, the feed just seems so damn random. Well, a lot of that is because the feed is meant to be structured in essentially engagement parameters. What are you likely to engage with? We'll put that at the top. And if they wanted to, they could very easily say, guys, let's put all the negative stories about McDonald's at the top. Let's suppress all the positive ones. And they could easily, impact public opinion in that way.
Yeah, it's a big, huge thing, and I don't know how you regulate, how you police all of this. I really, really don't. But let's move on, because this big data is one thing, okay? And I'm in ground zero, so to speak, here in the UK, because I live in Britain's first smart city. Now, the smart city, it relies on big data so that it can basically improve life, improve all of the services we have here, make life easier and far more convenient. But with Alexas, with all of our smart devices, with all of our smart gadgets, our phones, everything else, you're talking about a heck load of data every single minute of every single day being generated. And this then brings into the conversation 5G, because you need that greater bandwidth to be carrying all of this information around. Now, 5G, Brendan, it's a huge topic online. Some people love it, some people hate it. And before I let you have your say on 5G, I'm on the fence because I would like to see more science being done, independent scientific studies being done on the long-term effects of what these frequencies may or may not be doing to us. But at the same time, I can tell people that living in Glasgow, got the 5G router, we've got 5G networks now, you can start to get your 5G plan for your mobile phone. And it sounds it sounds horrible. But the point I make is when I go outside, I don't see people cooking in the street like some of these websites claim is going to happen when 5G goes on. And this is why I'm on the fence, because yes, I see the dangers listed out there online, some of them from not very respectable sources, but some of them from the science community. Yet at the same time, practically, I don't see any of the fears coming into reality yet. So what's your take on 5G? Is it something that is totally terrifying? Is it something that's great? What does Brendan say to that?
I am in a very similar boat as you. So I think that these companies, first off, 5G, the benefits of it are very apparent, right? You're talking about a speed up of like 10 to 100 times. You're talking about being able to download a movie on your phone in a matter of seconds. I don't have 5G where I live, right? I did a speed test earlier at Starbucks on my data plan while I was waiting in line to see like what do I get on 4G LTE, and I was getting like maybe 50 megabytes per second, which is pretty good for a wireless network. I mean, that's damn good, but still not good enough for many applications. And we can talk about those applications in a minute. 5G is promising gigabytes per second. Okay, so the benefits are very apparent. The other benefit is low latency, right? You have very little. Everyone has lagged in a video game and gotten pissed off, right? I mean, that happens. That happened my entire childhood. You lag, your ping is too high, you're not communicating with servers effectively. You lag, you die, you think you shot someone, they ran around a corner, they shot you through a wall, et cetera, et cetera. You get pissed. It's normal, okay? Everyone suffers from it. But these 5G networks promise latencies on the order of milliseconds. Okay, so the benefits are apparent. It's easy to wrap your head around why you'd want to roll out a new network, a fifth generation network. Kev, I did want to mention something to you because this actually does seem to be a misconception. And I wanted to ask you about it. You said you have a 5G router. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Well, it's got a 2G channel, it's got a 5G channel.
Right. Okay. This is a misconception actually. Um, so the 5G actually stands for 5 gigahertz in your case on the router. The 5G in the network is we're talking about the fifth generation of networks. And the actual frequency of the waves that will be used in a 5G network as opposed to a 5G router is like a factor of 5 or 6. So we're talking about wavelength or frequencies at like 30 gigahertz or 35 gigahertz as opposed to the 5 gigahertz, because 5 gigahertz, I think, what your router outputs, I think that's equivalent to like a 3G network coming from a cell phone, I think. But yeah, so we're talking about, in some cases with 5G, we're talking about much higher ranges than 5 gigahertz, as is the case. So that's why, as we get higher and higher and higher frequencies, we begin to shift the light we're using, the photons we're using, the radio waves we're using into microwaves, and closer to the regions that people are so afraid of, things like gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet radiation. You know from experience that these things are not good for you. When you get an X-ray, you are hurting your body. It is not safe to get an X-ray. Sometimes you need it because you broke a bone or whatever. But it's not safe. You shouldn't get X-rays all day long. It's not a good idea because it ionizes the DNA in your body. Your DNA, your body is made up of atoms. Those atoms have electrons. When you hit them with ionizing radiation, you cause the electron to escape. It escapes the atom, you set it free, you ionize it, and it literally damages the things that make you up. It's a very apparent reason it damages you. It's the reason you shouldn't be in an X-ray very long. It's the reason ultraviolet radiation is bad for you, etc. That's well thought out. Now, the 5G networks, they don't damage your skin in the same way. They don't damage your DNA in the same way. They don't have energies that can ionize you. But the point you brought up is a good one, Kev. There are some people saying that there could be problems with heating your body up with the thermal properties of these sorts of. In fact, the two spots on your body that are particularly susceptible are your eyeballs and your balls. Okay, the male genitalia. Okay, because there's a reason. This is an interesting little science tidbit for you, Kev. I hope you enjoy this one.
I love it.
There's a reason your balls, your testicles hang from you, and they're not inside of you. And the reason is because they have to be kept at a very particular temperature. And if we want to get even, more detailed, there's a reason they hang lower in the summer when it's hot out. Now, I know you never experience that, Kev, because you're in Glasgow. And
I was about to check there, but then I remembered I'm on camera, so I better not check right now, right?
Yes, so there's a reason, though. It's your body. It's regulating the temperature of your testes, okay? Now, they are particularly susceptible to this radiation, to any radiation, really, because they don't have the protection like the rest of your body does, and your eyeballs too. I mentioned those, but they're not as interesting, so we don't talk about them as much. So has this been studied?
But you think about it, Brendan. I mean, you've got the phone in your pocket. I would say the majority of the time, but not anymore because people have the majority of the time in front of their eyeballs. So those two parts of the body are definitely getting their fair share, right?
Yeah, I used to do this thing that I have since stopped doing since I learned this, where when I was driving, I would always keep my phone like under my leg on the seat. And that's a common thing that I see other people do. Maybe don't do that. Probably not good. You're gonna get testicle cancer or something. Don't do that. I'm not saying you will. I don't even there's no evidence that the cell phone will actually cause you to get cancer. There are some studies. There's one study in particular that exposed rats and mice to this form of radiation for several years. I think it was 2 years, 3 years. And they exposed them to it for 9 hours a day. And they wanted to measure, is there an uptick in cancer rates? Well, it turned out for the mice, there was none. For the rats, for the female rats, there was none. But for the male rats, there was an increased rate of tumors in the heart. Okay. Now, what's so interesting about this research, Kev, is that what ended up happening was the rats who got tumors in their heart ended up living longer on average than the rats who didn't. So if the radiation hurt you, it caused tumors to develop in your heart, but it also caused you to live longer. So that is what we call in the scientific community inconclusive. Okay. And that seems to be the trend, is that there doesn't seem to be a ton of, really good research on this topic. And that is when I come back to the main point, Kevin, the point that I think we can both agree on. These companies that are going to roll out emerging technology need to be more responsible for the funds that it costs to research them. And I'll explain to you why I say that. If I want to study 5G right now, 5G is already present in most major American cities. It's already present you say it's very prevalent in Scotland.
Yep.
Right?
We've got Edinburgh, we've got Glasgow. Some areas of Glasgow have got it. We've been trialed last year, but because we've got the smart city here, they're desperate to roll it out here. London.
Do they have thousands of these towers put up on?
Yes. Yeah, you can see them everywhere, yeah.
Yes, and it's one of the things that maybe I assume your audience knows because you say you talk about it a lot, but I'll mention it. With 5G, one of the things that will have to be done is you have to put up a bunch of towers, a bunch of radio towers. They're tiny. We have the technology to make them compact. They'll put them on top of street lights or telephone poles or whatever. But you have to put up thousands. You have to put up thousands because the 5G network doesn't travel well through the walls of a building, or even the door of a car, if you will. It doesn't go through as well as, say, a 4G or a 3G or 2G. That's why when you go out to the mountains, go out into the wilderness. I don't know if you ever noticed this, Kev. You'll go out somewhere and you'll have a 4G connection or a 5G connection, and the 5G connection will stop as you drive away from the city, and the 4G connection will stop eventually, but you'll still be able to make calls and send texts. And that's because as we shift to higher and higher frequencies, the range over which these things are applicable falls down. So that's why you'll notice your 4G LTE connection disappeared, but you can still call and text. I notice that a lot when I'm traveling around the areas that I tend to travel. But these companies, okay, these companies that are going to roll out this technology need to be liable for the costs of research. If I went out and I applied for a grant to study this, it would take me a year to apply for the grant, okay? Because I would have to wait for the cycle, the grant solicitation cycle to roll around. I would have to submit my application. They would have to review the application. That might take another year. So we're 2 years in and I finally get my money, okay? Now I have to set up the experiment. Okay, great. That might take a year to set up all the infrastructure, to buy all of the stuff, to recruit all of the scientists that I need. So 3 years have gone by. Great. I can finally study. Well, you already heard me mention that they did the study on these rats for 2 years. So, all right, let's assume I want to study on rats for 2 years. Now it's 5 years have gone by. Meanwhile, the entire country has 5G. I'm still trying to figure out if it's safe. 5 years have gone by. Great. I have results. I want to publish them. All right, I submit them to a journal. A year has gone by. The journal gets back to me, says, okay, we want to publish your results. They'll be published next year. 7 years goes by. Finally, the scientific community can see what I've done. All right. That's how inefficient that some of this research can be. And it's not because the scientists are lazy. It's because the bureaucracy and the infrastructure that you have to deal with in order to actually get these sorts of things done and published. So 7 years goes by. I finally have results, but the world already has its 5G. So my research really wasn't applicable to begin with. It's not necessary because, whether it's dangerous or not, people are using it. That is why when emerging technologies like this get unrolled, it should be on the company's dime to prove. The burden of proof is on them. They should have to prove that the technology is safe and usable, and not internally, because then, of course, they would just make up data and publish fake results. They should have to open up solicitation cycles just like the government does, and scientists can apply to use those funds to study the very things they need to study, and it can be done quickly, efficiently, and within the course of, say, a year or 2 years. And once the technology is proven safe, then we can begin unrolling the technology. We have a history in this world of just rolling stuff out and rolling stuff out and having it be so damn bad for everyone, and having it kill so many people, and having it contribute to the death of the very earth we live on, that we need to be more careful in the future.
Absolutely. And these frequencies, they've been used by the military for a long time with some of their technology, and 5G is something that's rolled down from military use and now it's been made commercial. And I think the time it's been used in the military, maybe we could look at that. And again, I don't see any big red flags. And I know people listening to this show are going to say, but Kev, 5G is dangerous. Well, I'm not saying it's not dangerous. I just want to see a lot more science before I make one definitive call or another. And just yesterday, we had scientists warning of the 5G health effects at the Washington, D.C. Council. And over here in Europe, the EU you mentioned earlier, I find this quite ironic, actually. All this talk of the dangers of 5G, and nobody in Glasgow ever asked if we were wanting to be a smart city in the first place. Don't remember anyone asked if they wanted 5G rolled out in the first place. Yet Brussels have banned 5G technology because of the concerns over it. And I find that interesting, the location. All of the most influential politicians in Europe are scared of what 5G might do to the place that they're living in. But the rest of us, well, we're basically like human guinea pigs in their experiment,
Yes. Oh, it's absolutely true. I mean, you have a bunch of countries. You have, the Netherlands, you have Switzerland. Both of these countries are taking steps to make sure that before 5G is completely rolled out, that we do some testing. You have states like New Hampshire. They're, establishing a commission to study the health effects. You have places in the U.S. like Mill Valley, California, a town in California, that banned banned the rolling out of 5G. So the fears, extend across the entire world. I'm not convinced, based on any, scientific understanding of the process behind how these radio waves interact with human beings, or microwaves interact with human beings. I'm not convinced that there's any effect that is going to, cause you to die right off the bat. Like you said, you have many people living amongst it right now, and you don't see people baking or cooking, and I suspect you won't see people baking or
I
cooking.
hope not.
Because, as we get to higher and higher and higher and higher frequencies, that will become a concern.
Do you think that's going to happen, Brendan? Do you think there will be a need for a 6G, a 7G, or whatever they come up with?
That's a tough question, because,
the way I see 5G just now, the way I see it is, yeah, commercially, they try to sell us the product as, your games are going to be flawless, no lagging, you'll be able to watch 4K Netflix shows on the way to work, etc. That's great. But I think the main game for 5G is what we were talking about in the first part of the show. It's piping in all of this data that's been produced, not just by us now, but with all of our gadgets, with all of the sensors and detectors that are out there as well. And having had Geordie Rose on the show, who's creating these synths, these synthetic robots, the fact that they're going to be controlled through the 5G as well, automation, you've got the self-driving cars, stuff like that.
Yes.
I think they're going to be more reliant, and they're going to be more dependent on a 5G network than any of the kind of stuff that we're going to take advantage of, i.e. streaming games and streaming videos, right?
Yes, 1,000%. See, I mentioned that in passing, but we can talk about it more now. That is the real strength of the 5G network. That's the reason that, I shouldn't say the reason. Of course, the reason that people want to roll it out, companies want to roll it out, is to make money off of the consumer. But from a scientific standpoint, the real silver lining here is the way in which it will improve things like self-driving cars. Because, eventually we're going to have cities that are pretty much dominated by self-driving cars. Right? Eventually, humans are going to stop driving themselves places. I'm not saying it's going to happen next year or in a decade, but it will happen.
It will happen, yeah.
And when it happens, I live in a city. I see people, autopiloting in their Tesla, frequently. But if we have self-driving cars, and only self-driving cars, you're going to be able to have seamless traffic, right? I mean, the need for a red light might even dissipate. Only if you can have cars communicate with one another quickly. If you have a latency of 1 or 2 seconds, there will be crashes, because cars need to be able to communicate with each other that quickly.
Yeah.
We need things
this system
like
as well.
milliseconds.
Yeah, this system as well, Brendan, it works best if all cars are automated and they're all talking to each other, because throwing a spanner into the works would be having a human on the road, because we are so unpredictable, and that's where we're going to get problems. So I totally agree with you, dude. And again, I don't think it's going to be next year. I don't think it's going to be 5 years, but it's coming. And eventually, I think we'll just hire a ride. The ride will turn up. Maybe we'll car share. It'll pick other people up, but it's going to be a passenger experience, And again, I actually think that might be all right, because I do think it'll cut down on road crashes, fatalities due to road crashes, things like that.
Yeah.
There's a plus
it increases your time to do stuff that you like. Yeah. I spend,
Oh, there we go. There we go. There's the break. We will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Brendan Drachler, thestateoftheuniverse.com. I seriously can't believe I'm saying this already, but final segment of today's Kev Baker Show. Really? Wow, this has gone by so fast, and that's because I'm hanging out with Brendan Drachler. And Brendan, he's kind enough to come on here once a month, and we usually talk about space because Brendan, he's doing astrophysics. I call him the black hole detective. He's working on simulations with black holes, things like that. But today we've shifted kind of topics, and we've gone into stuff that really I'm more familiar with, the 5G, the big data, all that kind of thing. But folks, please, I'm going to keep on telling you until it annoys you. Check out The State of the Universe, and it's thestateoftheuniverse.com. You can go to iTunes store, type in the state, and because of all the things we've been talking about today with the AI, it'll take you right to the State of the Universe podcast. And coming up on your show this week, Brendan, you were telling me you've got an archaeologist coming on, right?
Yes, I do. Dr. John Hoops. He is an archaeologist and anthropologist. He's one of the primary experts in the world on South American cultures. And it's funny, Kev, one of the things that I have planned to talk about a lot is that I hadn't known this and I didn't consider this, but there's one science in the world that has more disinformation and pseudoscience than any other, and that science is archaeology. Archaeology is maybe the only science where the pseudoscience is accepted more than the science fact, and you need to look no further than shows like Ancient Aliens to see that. You don't think about it often, but archaeologists have to deal with this all the time, trying to convince people that no, that the aliens didn't build the pyramids. We understand that the pyramids will be, here's how they were built. Now, of course, there's mysteries. There's a lot of mysteries, and that's what we'll talk about on the show this week.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. And yeah, I'm into a bit of the pseudoscience when it comes to archaeology. I must admit, I still don't know how they put those pyramids together. But
yeah, I love it.
Oh, I absolutely love it. Absolutely. Now, before the break, we were getting into 5G, stuff like that. And controversially, it shouldn't be controversial, but controversially, myself and Brendan, we're pretty much on the fence on this. And we agree that more science needs to be done before we can make a definitive decision, good or bad. But to go back into the 5G, you were mentioning low latency during the break, Brendan. Mm-hmm. Talk to the audience about that.
Yeah, so, we mentioned self-driving cars, right? If you want a self-driving car to brake for someone, you know how fast do humans react? Human reaction time is really good, especially when you're doing something high stress like driving. You can react in time for a lot of stuff. Most humans have almost been in an accident that was avoided due to really low reaction time. Well, you need cars to do the same thing. So you need cars to be able to react on order of milliseconds, and in order to reach those reaction times, you need them to be able to communicate with the network that governs them in a few milliseconds. So that's where 5G comes in. Another example that people don't realize a lot is that there's a reason drones have not been widely used as we suspected they would be just 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you were convinced, most people were, that Amazon would be sending drones to drop packages off at their front door by now, but they haven't been. Why? The why has everything to do with the network, okay? Right now, we cannot make drones very effectively. I mean, we can make them pretty good, and they're pretty cheap at Walmart if you go buy them, but I'm talking about high-tech drones that have, a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence built into them. We can't make them well, and the reason we can't make them well is because right now, it takes a long time for a drone to communicate with its network. So if you imagine you have a drone and it's flying and it's autonomous, its goal is to find your house and drop off a package. Well, if it's coming up on a tree, it has to make a decision. Do I go around the tree? Is it an obstacle? Is it just something on the horizon that's tricking me? Can I keep going? These are important decisions that the drone has to make. Well, in order for the drone to make that decision, okay, it would ordinarily have to communicate with the network, but it doesn't because network communication is slow. You need the drone to make that decision in the order of milliseconds, not in the order of seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, because it's going to hit the tree by then, or it's going to hit a building by then. So you need autonomous drones to communicate fast. The way that problem has been solved is by building computers into the drone. That way you eliminate the need for it to, talk to a network. But that makes the drone heavy, and it makes the technology, pretty rigid and hard to reproduce. Networks are the future, so that you could take the computer out of that drone, and instead you could just put a little chip in the drone. It makes it, 10 times lighter. It takes all the computation out. It makes it much more mass producible. And then you can have all of your algorithms stored on a computer back at some network, some home base, and you can communicate with that network. And you could have, hundreds, thousands of drones all over your city that can all communicate effectively. They don't have to have large computers on board. They don't have to have AI built in. All they need is a chip to communicate back home. And the way to do that is through 5G. I shouldn't say through 5G. The way to do that is through faster networks. That doesn't necessarily mean you need 5G. It just means you need faster networks. And 5G is the brute force way of getting a faster network. So that is the way that's being done.
I
And
think
that's just one.
yeah, I think these
What?
commercial drones you're talking about, they're going to be a real big business sometime real soon. Probably, like you say, when the 5G is all in installed, and whether it's
Mhm.
Amazon, whether it's other companies, I do think that is going to be a huge business, Brendan. I really, really do.
Yeah, I remember just like, 5, 6 years ago, when I was, in college for the first few years. I was in college 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I remember, Amazon beginning to do tests on drones that would deliver packages. And then it was big news for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden it died and it went away. And I never understood why it went away. And I think the reason it went away has everything to do with the fact that networks are very, very laggy. They have a lot of latency. It's hard to communicate with your drone effectively. So 5G will pave the way for that sort of infrastructure.
And folks, you go online, you're going to see a lot of pro, a lot of anti 5G discussion. And you were even saying to me during one of the breaks, Brendan, that something the Russians are doing or have been accused of is kind of muddying the waters on this very topic, right? They've been putting out all the kind of memes that have been scaring people, you were saying.
Yeah, Russia's easy to point a finger at.
Yeah,
And Russia certainly does this stuff.
and we've got to be
But it's
careful because, I mean, people do know that I'm a Russian agent because I watch Russia Today and I talk about their news and things. So,
I see.
I've got to
Yes.
be careful here now.
And I can tell that from you because the viewers don't know this, but on the breaks, you actually speak in a Russian accent.
I know, don't tell them that. And of course, I'm going on Sputnik News soon as well with Lee Stranahan. So the rumors are going to be rife then.
Oh boy, yeah. So the viewers, you guys might not have known that, but yes, this Scottish accent is actually completely fake.
I'm a deep fake. I'm a deep fake, Brendan. That's what it is.
Yes. So, take that with a grain of salt, but it is true. Okay. Now, I don't know, 5G, people just have. Here's the thing. This is the thing that boggles my mind. People say, well, what is the fear with 5G, Kev? What is the fear that you hear people say? What do people
It's going to
think
damage
5G
their DNA. It's going to damage the telomeres at the end of their DNA. It's going to knock them off. It's going to cook them. It's going to cause widespread cancer. These are some of the things that I've seen. And like I said to you, Brendan, I've probably lost a few listeners in recent times because I've turned away from looking at everything with a conspiratorial eye, and I try and adopt a lot more logic now, and I try and look at both sides of the argument. And for me, like we've both said, the science is still out, and people, practically speaking, here in Glasgow, I don't see people suffering. And again, it's only been a short time, I get that. But I think the major fears are cancer, DNA damage, all the good stuff that would naturally make you petrified.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The science isn't there yet, right? I have a quote that I wrote down from Dr. Michael Wyde, and he was one of the people that did some of these studies that I mentioned earlier with the rats. And he said 5G is an emerging technology that hasn't really been defined yet. And from what we currently understand, this is his quote, it likely differs dramatically from what we studied. So what that means is even the studies that have been done cannot necessarily be applicable for the 5G that is being rolled out by companies. So what does that mean? Well, that means the science isn't there. So what do you have to do? You have to look at it with a critical eye, and you have to say, is there any reason for me to suspect that 5G is going to kill me and is going to be bad? And then you come to the logical conclusion, well, wait, 5G is already rolled out in some cities. What's going on in those cities? Is everyone dying? Is everyone getting murdered? Is everyone getting slowly cooked? No. The simple answer is no. No one's getting cooked. Okay, so if no one's getting cooked, then how do you address that as someone who believes everyone's getting cooked? Well, I guess you have to put your blinders on and pretend that people are getting cooked, or I don't know. I don't know how you address that as someone. I don't understand how you address most of these ideas, like
People
with flat Earth. Like I don't understand.
People seem to have, and I've been there as well. I'm not like speaking down to anyone or anything, but when you're looking at information on the internet, it would appear that, used to say that if it bleeds, it leads in the mainstream media, right? And it's the same online. If it's like negative, if it's full of fear, if it's really overhyped and dramatic, Doesn't matter about whether it's factual or not, but if it's got all of those qualities besides the facts, it's going to go viral. And yet, if you stick to the facts and you try and be more logical and look at both sides, and people don't tend to want that kind of information, Brendan. It's something psychological. It's a psychological trait. And again, it's not speaking bad against anyone, because I was exactly the same when I first started looking into, how the world really worked. But I like to observe people, and that's something I have noticed. If I put out a video with a really kind of hyperbolic or fearful title, it's going to get 10 times more traffic than just something mundane, but for the same topic.
Yeah, you just made me think about something. I uploaded a video or a show 2 weeks ago where I did a whole show on 5G, explaining what it is and if it's dangerous. And I titled it, "Is 5G dangerous?" Or "Is 5G safe," rather. I should have titled it, "5G might be dangerous," because it's saying the same thing, but I guarantee you it would have gotten more clicks and more views.
Yep.
Um,
You're right.
yes.
I don't know what it
Yeah,
is.
you also have to be careful, I think, about people selling you snake oil, right? On the internet, Kev, you and I both know that even if we don't believe 5G is dangerous, if I made a video that said 5G is dangerous, I have proof. And all my proof is that I am an astrophysicist working at a university, and I say 5G is dangerous. I don't have to give any evidence. I don't have to give any data. I could just say, I'm an astrophysicist, I work at a university, I'm credible, 5G is dangerous. I could skyrocket my number of views. I could get thousands, tens of thousands, 20,000 views on a video like that if I wanted to begin pushing, these sort of agendas where I'm pretending to believe in stuff I don't believe in. I mean, isn't that the Alex Jones model, right? That's literally the model that was put forth by Alex Jones many years ago. And I think he's toned that down a little bit because it's gotten him in a little trouble here and there. But
I'm
that's the
Alex
model.
Jones. I'm one of Alex Jones's biggest fans, but it doesn't make me blind. And you're right, dude. I mean, there was shows where he would spend 2.5 hours absolutely scaring the hell out of everyone about Fukushima, and then tell you that he's got the magic iodine to protect you at the end of it. So, but I mean, again, I'm still one of his biggest kind of fan. Well, I wouldn't say fans. I still watch the show. I take a lot of pointers from him. But you're absolutely right, dude. And you see that a lot in alternative media. I'm glad to say network here, not so much. We would get canned in a minute if we started trying to go down that road. We try to do it as good as we can, as legitimate as we can, as honest as we can. But you're spot on, brother. A lot of this stuff is generated so that products can be sold on the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the source always. Look at the source. What are they doing? What is their goal? Are they asking you for donations? Do they have a Patreon page? Be careful. Don't be duped. But at the same time, there's maybe people on that are in the scientific community or somewhere else that will try to dupe you as well. So every organization has shitty people inside of it, at least one, and they will always try to trick you, to dupe you, to convince you of something that is fake. Just, I guess, the theme in this episode, Kev, has been be vigilant. Look into stuff, verify, check.
Yep, and that's kind of the new tagline that I've been using for the show. We provide and let you decide. And I always tell the listeners, don't believe a word that me or my guests say, because I'm only human. I can be wrong. My biases, my prejudice might get in the way of some things. And all I can do is encourage people to take the information that we give them, Brendan, and then use that as a platform, a springboard to go and do their own research so that they can form their own ideas. How many ideas do people have that they think are their own, but really they've been packaged up and given to them by a podcast or a website or a TV show? And it's that art of thinking for ourselves, taking the time to do even the most basic of, fact checking. Even that's gone nowadays. It's all about convenience. People want to be first as opposed to have the best information.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I do this thing on my show where I do my best to incorporate, quotes from people in that particular world. And that way I can provide you not just with opinionated information, but with, information from other people, from people inside the world, from outside the world. And you can try to form, a well-rounded opinion about something. Just like you say, keep your mind open, but what is it you say?
Keep your mind open, but
don't.
yeah, don't let your brain fall out.
See, that's good. Yeah, that's it. That's all we ask.
Absolutely. So if you get any other points on big data, 5G, anything else that we've talked about tonight before I pick your brain on some of the latest and greatest space news?
Nope, you can pick my brain.
Well, I seen a story recently, and I don't have it to hand, unfortunately, but it was talking about how scientists discovered that our own Milky Way, it's a bit weird, right? I always kind of thought of it as a flattish kind of disc, but they're saying it's twisted. Is this right, Brendan? What's going on, man?
Yeah, it's twisted, but maybe twisted isn't the proper term, because twisted implies it's like shaped like an S, right? It is not flat. We'll say that.
Is it
One
warped?
thing we noticed,
Would warped be a better kind of term
warped
for it?
might be a good word. Yeah. So at the ends of the disc, what we see is that the disc tends to be warped at the ends, and the mechanism for this warping is not yet understood. It's hypothesized that it's probably due to tidal interactions with galaxies around us, tiny dwarf galaxies. We can see these galaxies. If you live in the southern hemisphere, you can go out and you can see the large Magellanic Cloud in your night sky. You can see the small Magellanic Cloud in your night sky. These are some people will even classify them as galaxies. They're small galaxies, they're halo galaxies, they're dwarf galaxies, whatever you want to call them. They are collections of stars, many, many, many stars, and they orbit around the Milky Way. And they will eventually merge with the Milky Way. Now, there was probably small galaxies like that in the past that did merge. And when they merged, they produced some of this gravitational warping effect that we see. Now, what's really interesting is how that discovery was even made. Because as you might suspect, it's really hard to understand. One of the tougher things, actually, is to understand the structure of our own galaxy. It's really easy to determine the structure of other galaxies because we can look at them from the
outside looking in, but how can you look at something that you're already inside?
Yes, it's an excellent question. And, historically, it's been done by mapping hydrogen. Hydrogen gives off a very particular form of radio wave in the so-called 21 centimeter transition. It's not an important point. It's just for people who want to take notes. Take notes. No one's taking notes. Is someone writing this down? No one's writing this down, for sure. But if you care, you can look at 21 centimeter line. We've modeled, we've looked at hydrogen across our galaxy in this way with radio telescopes for decades. That was one of the very first things radio telescopes did. In fact, I think it might have been the first. If you ignore like military uses, the first thing they did in astronomical purposes was to map hydrogen in the Milky Way. And we can learn how the Milky Way is structured in that way. But now we have some more tools, some more creative tools. And the tool that was used in that study is Cepheid variables. Have you ever heard of a Cepheid star?
I haven't. No, this is new to me, dude. Do explain.
Okay, a Cepheid star is a variable star, and that means that it literally changes its size and brightness. Okay, it actually like pulsates.
Whoa!
Like a star that pulsates. It's not a pulsar, but it's a variable star that changes its brightness over time.
Are they quite rare? Yeah.
They're not very rare.
No.
I mean, they're rare in the sense that not every star is one, but they're not so rare that we can't find them. In fact, we find tons of them. In this particular study, I think they used thousands of them to map the galaxy. And so these stars are useful for a particular reason. The reason is that their change in brightness, okay, rather their period, how long it takes for them to get from maximum brightness to minimum brightness to maximum brightness to minimum, their period is directly related to how intrinsically bright they are. Now, that is important, Kev, because everything in the universe, when it comes to distances, our goal is always to determine how bright something is, okay? That's a hard thing to do generally because everything varies in brightness. But Cepheid variables are what we call a standard candle. That means that they are always the same brightness if they were observed from the same spot, from the same distance. Now, let me try to unconfuse you because undoubtedly you're confused. Imagine you're on a football field and you have a candle placed at a football field's not a good idea because...
No, it's okay. I know American football. You're okay with me. And the majority of our audience are American, I would imagine.
Okay,
so,
let's imagine we're on an American football field, all right? And we're standing in the end zone and we put a candle, we take a candle and we put it at the 10-yard line, and we take another identical candle that will be exactly as bright, and we put it at the 20-yard line, and we take another one, and we put it at the 50-yard line, and another one at the other end. What will happen? The 10-yard line candle will look pretty bright. The 20 will look a little dimmer. The one at the 50-yard line will look even dimmer, and the one at the other end you'll barely be able to make out. That has everything to do with distance, not brightness. And we can calculate how far away the candle is at the other end of the field by how bright it looks, because we know how bright it should be. All right? And we use Cepheid variables in the exact same way. We know how bright the thing should appear. And because we know how bright it should appear and how bright it does appear, we can determine how far away it is. Okay, does that make sense to you, Kev?
Yeah, that does. Yeah.
Okay, and so by doing that, we can determine very precisely how far away these stars are. And because we can determine how far away they are, and we can determine are they below the galactic plane, are they above the galactic plane, etc., we can literally map the stars in the Milky Way. And we can say, wait a minute, the Milky Way, it sort of tapers off at the end, if you will. Like it looks almost, if you will, like water that's running off like the surface of a counter. If you could imagine that, or water coming out of a hose, it sort of tapers off. And the mechanism for that, the reason it does that, like I said, is unknown. But nevertheless, it is a very interesting observation. And I'm glad I could teach you about Cepheid stars. Cepheid stars were the first standard candle in the history of astronomy. The second standard candle that we found was type 1a supernova. Because type 1a supernova are all created by the same exact mechanism, which is matter from a star accreting onto a white dwarf. And once a white dwarf reaches a certain radius, it can no longer sustain itself and it blows up. Okay? Mm-hmm. Because that mechanism happens at the same exact way every single time. So matter accretes onto the white dwarf reaches a very particular size, a very well-defined size, and it will blow up. That process happens the same exact time, no matter the white dwarf. It could be a white dwarf in the Milky Way or the Andromeda or wherever it is. The point is, it always blows up the exact same way and has the exact same intrinsic brightness, like the candles on the football field. And because you can look at a supernova and say, that one looks twice as dim as the other one I found, therefore it must be X amount of distance further. Does that
no, make sense? That really does make sense. And that must be really useful then, if these the ones you were saying get to a certain size and then they explode. That must be a really good way then, if they've all followed that same pattern, to gauge what state it's in when they're looking at one of a particular size then, yeah?
Yes, we use these standard candles are the sole reason, I would say, the sole reason that we understand distances in the universe. Without something like a standard candle, we would have no basis for understanding how far away things are. And that's why for the longest time, we didn't understand how far away things are until we started to find these standard candles, until we started to understand that thing only looks dimmer because it's further away. It's not actually dimmer.
The only thing that numbers when it comes to distances in space, the only thing I can actually now think they're comparable to is the numbers that we see generated from big data. It really is. And we're almost out of time. And I need to thank you, Brendan, because I had a fascinating show with Dr. David Warmflash. And that was thanks to your recommendation. He came on. He was like our Apollo 50 treat for the audience. Great guy. I hope you enjoyed the 50th anniversary of Apollo. It'd be wrong of us not to shill for NASA, at least for 1 minute before we go away.
Yeah, it would be wrong of us. Yeah, the 50th anniversary was it was bittersweet, because it's this monumental moment. If you've never heard the JFK speech, the "We are going to the moon" speech, you need to go listen to it. Even if you think the moon landing was fake, I don't care. It doesn't change the fact that speech is incredible. Yeah. It touches you in such an interesting, weird way. And yeah, go listen to it. And it's bittersweet because we haven't been back, and it's coming soon though. We're going to get back.
Artemis, absolutely, brother. And we are almost out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget though, it doesn't finish here on TFR. We don't roll like that. The information keeps coming. Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew, after the break, they will pick up the baton and continue where myself and Brendan leave off. And please, I urge you all, check out thestateoftheuniverse.com. That is thestateoftheuniverse.com. Check the website out. There's various ways to listen on there. And I'll be back tomorrow night with Bill Bean and a couple of additional special guests. Don't go anywhere, folks. Wherever you are, make it TFR.